I received a mysterious letter from a lawyer about my estranged father's will, despite him abandoning me 20 years ago. I initially planned to throw it away, but curiosity won. Opening the envelope revealed he left me his entire estate worth millions, including the family business. My first reaction was anger and confusion. Why now? The lawyer explained my father had a change of heart before dying. When news spread to my relatives, vicious texts and calls flooded in. My family's true colors emerged as they fought for what they believed was rightfully theirs. The morning I received that letter started like any other Tuesday. I woke up at 6, made coffee in my tiny Chicago apartment, and prepared for another challenging day as a social worker. For 12 years, I had dedicated my life to helping children navigate the foster care system. I understood their pain all too well. When I was 12, my father Gerald walked out of our lives without warning. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. One day he was at the breakfast table complaining about his eggs. The next he was living with his secretary in a luxury condo downtown. He never sent birthday cards, never paid child support, never showed up at school events. My mother Diane raised me alone, working as a waitress during the day and cleaning offices at night. She never badmouthed him, but the shadows under her eyes spoke volumes. We struggled financially, but were rich in love. Mom passed away from breast cancer just last year. Her funeral was small but meaningful, attended by her friends and my colleagues. My father didn't show up. I didn't expect him to. So when Mr. Harrington's letter arrived informing me that Gerald Wilson had died 3 weeks ago from a massive heart attack, I felt nothing. Or at least, that's what I told myself as my hands trembled holding the envelope. Your estranged father has left you an inheritance, the letter stated. I almost threw it away. Almost. My boyfriend Jack was there when I opened it fully. His eyes widened as Mr. Harrington detailed the extent of what I was to receive. A $4.2 million estate, controlling interest in Wilson Construction Company, and a vacation home in Maine that I never knew existed. This has to be a mistake, I whispered. Call the lawyer, Jack urged, his hand on my shoulder. This could change everything, Marjorie. Mr. Harrington's office was in a sleek downtown building with a view of Lake Michigan. He was older than I expected, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Your father amended his will 1 month before his death, he explained, sliding a document across his mahogany desk. He left everything to you, bypassing his wife Eleanor and his other children, Ashley and Travis. But why? I asked. He never cared before. Mr. Harrington handed me a sealed envelope. He asked me to give you this. The letter inside was written in a shaky hand. Marjorie, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I failed you as a father in every way possible. What I did was unforgivable, but I want you to know that I've followed your life from afar. I saw the newspaper article about your work with foster children. I was there, in the back row, at your college graduation. I was too ashamed to approach you, too afraid you'd reject me as I rejected you. This inheritance is not to buy your forgiveness, but to give you the support I should have provided all along. I'm proud of the woman you've become, despite having me as your father, Gerald. I stared at the letter, tears blurring my vision. Emotions crashed through me like wild waves, anger, grief, confusion, and a strange, unwelcome longing for the relationship we never had. There's more, Mr. Harrington said gently. Your father reconnected with your mother during her final months. They made peace with each other. That revelation hit me like a physical blow. Mom never mentioned this. Why hadn't she told me? Outside the office, Jack was waiting. Well? He asked. I showed him the letter, still numb with shock. This is a good thing, Marjorie, he said, squeezing my hand. Think of it as compensation for all those years of neglect. You deserve this. Did I? The thought of profiting from the death of a man who abandoned me felt wrong somehow. But another part of me whispered that this was justice, however delayed. That night, my phone exploded with notifications. Somehow, the news had spread to my half-siblings. Ashley's message was deceptively sweet. Just heard the news. We should talk, sis. Travis was more direct. You think you can just waltz in and take what belongs to our family? You've got another thing coming. I sat in my darkened apartment, staring at these messages from strangers who shared my blood, and realized that this inheritance wasn't just money and property. It was a Pandora's box, and I had just lifted the lid. The funeral home was elegant, with cream-colored walls and soft classical music floating through the air. I stood awkwardly in a black dress I'd borrowed from a colleague, feeling like an imposter among people who had actually known Gerald Wilson. My father's body lay in an expensive mahogany casket, his face serene in death in a way I never remembered it in life. I'd debated whether to attend at all, but Mr. Harrington had suggested it might provide closure. Now, as curious eyes turned toward me, I regretted my decision. "So you're Marjorie," a voice said behind me. I turned to face a woman in her 50s, immaculately dressed in designer morning clothes. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless despite the tear tracks. "Eleanor Wilson, my father's widow." "Yes," I replied simply. Her smile never reached her eyes. "How interesting that Gerald never mentioned he was in touch with you." "He wasn't," I said. "This is as surprising to me as it is to you." She laughed, a brittle sound. "Somehow I doubt that." Before I could respond, a young woman approached. She was beautiful in that carefully curated way that spoke of privilege and expensive taste. "Ashley, my half-sister. I've always wanted to meet you," she said, embracing me as if we were long-lost friends. Her perfume was overwhelming, her smile dazzling. "Daddy sometimes mentioned you." "Only when he was drinking," a male voice interjected. Travis looked like a younger version of our father, with the same square jaw and cold blue eyes. He didn't bother with a handshake. "Let's not pretend this is a family reunion. We all know why she's here." Ashley placed a manicured hand on his arm. "Not now, Travis. This isn't the time or place." But the glance she shot me contained the same hostility, just better concealed. I retreated to a quiet corner, wishing I could disappear. A man about my age approached, his smile genuine unlike the others. "You probably don't remember me," he said. "I'm Zach Turner. We used to play together when we were kids, before." He trailed off awkwardly. A vague memory surfaced, a lanky boy with braces and a baseball cap, showing me how to catch frogs at a pond. "Zach," I said, relieved to see a friendly face. "It's been a long time. Your dad talked about you, you know," he said quietly. "He kept track of you. Always had the newspaper clipped when you were mentioned. He was proud of your work with kids." My throat tightened. He had a funny way of showing it. The reception after the funeral was held at my father's home, a mansion that made my apartment look like a closet. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork that probably cost more than I made in 5 years. I wandered through rooms filled with strangers, feeling increasingly out of place. In the study, I found myself alone with Mr. Thornton, another family attorney. He seemed uncomfortable, glancing toward the door as if afraid of being overheard. "There's something you should know," he said in a low voice. "Your father changed his will after seeing your mother during her illness. They reconnected when he learned she was dying. Whatever happened during those meetings changed him profoundly." "Why would he see her after all those years?" I asked. "I believe they were each other's first loves," Mr. Thornton replied. "Sometimes those bonds never truly break." Our conversation was interrupted by Eleanor bursting into the room, her composure slipping. "I suppose you're pleased with yourself," she hissed, shutting the door behind her. 20 years of marriage, and suddenly Gerald throws it all away on some misplaced guilt over the daughter he never cared about. "Mrs. Wilson," Mr. Thornton began, but she cut him off. "Don't Mrs. Wilson me. I know you helped him change the will. You're as responsible as she is." She turned back to me, her mask completely dropped now. "You should know I was the one who convinced Gerald to stay away from you. He wanted to visit when you were 14, then again when you graduated high school. I told him it would only confuse you, that it was kinder to make a clean break." The revelation struck me like a slap. "You kept him away from me?" Her laugh was ugly. "It wasn't difficult. Gerald was weak, easily influenced. I wasn't about to let him waste our resources on his mistake from the past." Mr. Thornton looked mortified. Eleanor, this isn't helping. Do you think I care about helping? She snapped. This woman walks in and takes everything we've built, everything that should go to my children. I left the study, my mind spinning. As I passed through the hallway, a collection of framed photos caught my eye. Among family portraits of Eleanor, Ashley, and Travis were hidden several newspaper clippings. End quote. Me receiving an award for my work with the foster care system, a grainy photo from my college graduation. He really had been watching from afar. Later, I overheard Ashley and Travis in heated conversation on the patio. We need to challenge the will, Travis was saying. Claim he wasn't of sound mind. Already on it, Ashley replied. I've talked to Dr. Brennan. He's willing to testify that Dad was depressed, not thinking clearly. And I've got 3 friends who'll swear he told them he felt pressured to change the will. Good. That social worker has no idea who she's dealing with. Dad's company belongs in this family. I slipped away before they noticed me, my stomach churning. On my way out, I encountered a group of men in expensive suits, business associates of my father, I gathered. They fell silent as I passed, eyeing me with suspicion. So you're Gerald's firstborn, one of them said finally. Richard Blackwell. I was your father's partner for 15 years. Marjorie Wilson, I replied, extending my hand. He took it reluctantly. No offense, Miss Wilson, but this company is Gerald's legacy. It needs experienced leadership, not a social worker who knows nothing about construction. I never claimed to know anything about construction, Mr. Blackwell. Then perhaps you'd consider selling your shares. For the good of the company and the hundreds of employees who depend on it. His tone was reasonable, but his eyes were cold, calculating. I had the distinct impression that Richard Blackwell was not someone to underestimate. As I left the house, I felt eyes on me from every direction. In less than 24 hours, I had inherited millions and made enemies of an entire family. Whatever my father's intentions had been in leaving me his estate, the result was dropping me into a nest of vipers who saw me as a threat to everything they had. Jack was waiting in his car outside. How was it? He asked, as I slid into the passenger seat. Worse than I imagined, I replied, and burst into tears for the first time since receiving the lawyer's letter. A week after the funeral, I visited Wilson Construction Company headquarters. The imposing glass building in downtown Chicago housed over 300 employees, none of whom had expected their late boss's estranged daughter to become their new owner. The receptionist did a double take when I gave my name, hurriedly making a call before directing me to the executive floor. I felt painfully out of place in my department store blazer, amid people in designer business attire. Sarah Jenkins, the operations manager, was waiting for me. Unlike the others I'd met, her handshake was firm, and her smile seemed genuine. I worked with your father for 18 years, she said, leading me through a maze of offices. He was complicated, but he built something important here. Sarah gave me a tour of the facility, patiently explaining aspects of the business I struggled to understand. Halfway through, she pulled me into an empty conference room, closing the door. I shouldn't be saying this, she began, lowering her voice, but things haven't been adding up here for the past few years. There are projects on the books that never broke ground, payments to consultants who don't seem to exist. Your father started asking questions about 6 months ago. That's when the tension with Richard began. Richard Blackwell? My father's partner? Sarah nodded. They were arguing constantly. Then suddenly, they weren't. Your father stopped investigating, started taking more time off. It was strange. Why are you telling me this? I asked. I shouldn't be saying this, she began, lowering her voice. But things haven't been adding up here for the past few years. There are projects on the books that never broke ground, payments to consultants who don't seem to exist. Your father started asking questions about 6 months ago. That's when the tension with Richard began. Richard Blackwell? My father's partner? Because Gerald was a good man at heart. Whatever mistakes he made with you, and he knew they were unforgivable, he tried to do right by everyone else, including his employees. I'm afraid that's at risk now. I was so absorbed in my thoughts that I almost missed the slip of paper someone had slid under the door. Opening it, I felt a chill run through me. After the meeting with Sarah, I sat in my father's office, surrounded by the trappings of a life I knew nothing about. His desk calendar still showed appointments for the week he died. A half-empty pack of mints sat in a drawer. A framed photo of Eleanor, Ashley, and Travis smiled from the credenza. None of me. The police officer who responded seemed uninterested. Nothing stolen? Probably just kids from the neighborhood. We've had a few break-ins lately. That night, I returned to my apartment to find the door slightly ajar. Heart pounding, I called the building security guard to accompany me inside. Nothing appeared to be taken, but drawers were open, papers disturbed. Someone had searched my home. When Jack came over later, he seemed distracted, barely reacting to the news of the break-in. I didn't bother telling him about the note. Something told me it wouldn't make a difference, because there's something wrong at Wilson Construction. Sarah thinks. You're probably overreacting, he said, scrolling through his phone. Why would anyone care enough to threaten you? Sarah? He interrupted. You're taking business advice from an employee who has every reason to get on your good side? I'm just saying be careful what stories you believe, he continued. These people have worked there for years. You show up out of nowhere and start making accusations. I haven't accused anyone of anything, I said. I'm just trying to understand what I've inherited. Jack's phone buzzed. He checked it quickly, then stood. I've got to run. Early meeting tomorrow. Just don't do anything rash, okay? The next day, I decided to follow him. It wasn't like me to be suspicious, but nothing had been normal since that lawyer's letter arrived. I tracked Jack to a small cafe in Lincoln Park. Through the window, I could see him sitting across from a blonde woman, her back to me. When she turned to signal the waiter, my blood ran cold. Eleanor Wilson. I waited until Jack left, then followed Eleanor to a nearby boutique. She was examining an expensive scarf when I approached. Interesting shopping companion you have, I said. She didn't even flinch. Jack? He's been quite helpful. Amazing what people will do for the right price. Though he claims he's actually fallen for you, poor boy. The betrayal cut deep, but I kept my face neutral. How long has he been reporting to you? She didn't even flinch. Jack? He's been quite helpful. Amazing what people will do for the right price. Though he claims he's actually fallen for you, poor boy. I waited until Jack left, then followed Eleanor to a nearby boutique. She was examining an expensive scarf when I approached. Since the day after the funeral, you didn't think it was coincidence that you just happened to be dating someone when this inheritance fell into your lap, did you? We needed eyes on you. That evening, Jack showed up at my door with flowers. I let him in, watching his face as I said, I know you're working for Eleanor. He dropped the act immediately. Marjorie, it's not what you think. Really? Because I think my boyfriend has been spying on me for my stepmother. What part am I misunderstanding? It started that way, he admitted. But things changed. My feelings for you are real. How convenient. Eleanor approached me after Gerald died. Said she'd pay me to get close to you, find out what you knew about the company. I needed the money. My student loans. Get out, I said quietly. Marjorie, please. Get out, I screamed, throwing the flowers at him. After he left, I sat on the floor of my apartment and cried until there were no tears left. I had never felt so completely alone. The next day, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Marjorie Wilson? My name is Thomas Reed. I was a friend of your father's. We need to talk. We met at a diner far from my apartment, or the Wilson offices. Thomas was in his 60s, with salt and pepper hair and tired eyes. I've known your father since college, he began. I tried to talk him out of leaving you and your mother, but Gerald was stubborn. By the time he realized his mistake, Eleanor had her hooks in deep. Why contact me now? Thomas glanced around the diner, before sliding a folder across the table, because Gerald was going to fix things before he died. Not just with you, but with the company too. Wilson Construction has been laundering money for years. Richard brought in some dangerous investors. Your father found out, threatened to go to the authorities. I opened the folder to find financial records, bank statements, photos of Richard meeting with men I didn't recognize. Are you saying my father was murdered? I'm saying his heart attack came at a very convenient time for certain people. As I left the diner, my mind raced. If what Thomas said was true, I wasn't just dealing with a family upset about an inheritance. I was facing people capable of far worse. Back at my apartment, I went through my father's personal items that Mr. Harrington had given me. A watch, cufflinks, a fountain pen, and a key ring with an unusual blue key I couldn't identify. As I turned it over in my hand, I noticed something inside the pen case, a small USB drive hidden in a compartment. I plugged it into my laptop with shaking hands. The files contained years of financial records, emails between Richard, Eleanor, and Travis, documenting money movements that made no sense for a construction company. There were offshore accounts, shell companies, and references to investors with names that seemed vaguely Eastern European. My father had been collecting evidence. Against his wife, against his business partner, against his own son. I sat back, stunned by the implications. Gerald Wilson hadn't just left me an inheritance, he'd left me a time bomb. The legal challenge to my father's will came faster than even Mr. Harrington expected. Eleanor's attorneys filed a petition claiming Gerald had been unduly influenced and wasn't of sound mind when he made the changes. They've lined up 3 doctors to testify that your father was depressed and possibly suffering from early dementia, Mr. Harrington explained in his office. And they've got witnesses who claim Gerald told them he felt pressured to change his will after meeting with your mother. That's absurd, I said. My mother was dying of cancer. She could barely pressure anyone to pass the salt, let alone manipulate a millionaire into changing his will. I agree, but it's a compelling narrative for a judge. Terminally ill woman convinces former lover to disinherit his current family in favor of their adult daughter. They're painting you and your mother as opportunists. The court date was set for 3 months away. In the meantime, Eleanor had managed to get a temporary injunction preventing me from making any changes at Wilson Construction. Richard Blackwell was named interim CEO. My reputation in the Chicago business community, such as it was, came under attack. Rumors spread that I had manipulated a dying man, that I had a history of targeting wealthy older men, that I was planning to dismantle the company for quick cash. None of it was true, but the whispers followed me everywhere. I was beginning to understand why my father might have chosen the path of least resistance with these people for so long. 2 weeks after meeting Thomas Reed, he called again. We need to talk. Not over the phone. Meet me at Lakeside Park, near the boat rentals. Thomas looked more haggard than before, with dark circles under his eyes, and a nervous energy as we walked along the lakefront. I haven't been entirely honest with you, he said finally. I knew your mother much better than I initially let on. I'm your uncle, Marjorie, your mother's brother. I stopped walking. What? Mom never mentioned having a brother, because Gerald paid me to stay away. The shame in his voice was palpable. I was in financial trouble 25 years ago, about to lose my house, my marriage falling apart. Gerald offered me a way out if I cut ties with Diana, said it would be better for everyone. I was weak, and I took the deal. So when you reached out to me, I was trying to make amends. Your mother forgave me before she died, asked me to look out for you if anything happened. Why didn't you tell me this from the beginning? Because I was ashamed. And because Eleanor has people everywhere. I needed to be sure you weren't one of them. One of what? Thomas lowered his voice further. Eleanor's family has connections to organized crime in Detroit. That's how the money laundering started. Richard brought in the investors, but Eleanor provided the structure. She orchestrated the separation between your parents all those years ago, threatened your mother. The revelation left me reeling. Are you saying my entire childhood was shaped by criminal threats? Your mother left Gerald to protect you. He didn't abandon you, he was driven away, and then paid to stay away. When he learned Diana was dying, he finally stood up to Eleanor. That's when he changed his will. As I tried to process this information, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah at Wilson Construction. Found something important. Need to meet, as soon as possible. At the company, Sarah led me to a secluded storage room and pulled out a stack of documents. These are the original contracts for the Riverview project, she explained. Compare them to the versions filed with the city. She placed another set beside them. The differences were significant materials costs inflated by millions, subcontractors listed who didn't exist, permits for work never performed. They've been doing this for at least 7 projects that I can find, Sarah continued, siphoning funds, cutting corners on materials. If there's ever a structural failure, people could die, I finished. We need to take this to the authorities. Sarah looked scared. These people are dangerous, Marjorie. The last person who asked questions about the Riverview project was found in his car at the bottom of the Chicago River. I placed the documents in my bag, mind racing. I need a lawyer I can trust. Not just for the will contest, but for this. Sarah gave me a name. Cassandra Reynolds, a former prosecutor known for tackling corruption cases. Cassandra's office was modest compared to Mr. Harrington's, but her reputation was formidable. She listened without interruption as I laid out everything I'd learned. You're describing a significant RICO case, she said when I finished. Money laundering, fraud, possible involvement in at least one death. The question is whether your father was a willing participant or another victim. He was gathering evidence, I said. That has to count for something. Perhaps. But you need to understand what you're up against. These people won't just fight you in court. They've already shown they're willing to break into your apartment, threaten you, plant a boyfriend to spy on you. It's going to get worse before it gets better. As if confirming her prediction, when I returned home that night, I found my apartment had been vandalized. Furniture overturned, walls spray-painted with the message, "Back off, bitch." The police were as unhelpful as before. Probably random, the same officer suggested. This neighborhood has been having problems. I was gathering essentials to stay elsewhere when my phone rang. Ashley. I heard about your apartment, she said, sounding genuinely concerned. Are you okay? Why do you care? Because contrary to what you might think, I'm not Eleanor. I don't want to see you hurt. Really? Because your boyfriend seemed pretty cozy with Richard Blackwell at the funeral. There was a pause. Ex-boyfriend. I ended things after I found some disturbing messages on his phone. Marjorie, I think Travis is in trouble. He owes money to some dangerous people. That's why he's so desperate to get control of Dad's company. I wanted to believe her, but after Jack, trust didn't come easily. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm scared. And because despite everything, I think Dad was trying to do the right thing at the end. Eleanor, has everyone convinced you manipulated him, but I know the truth. I found his journals. My heart skipped a beat. What did they say? That he never stopped loving your mother. That leaving you was his greatest regret. And that he was afraid of what Richard and Eleanor were doing with the company. Before I could ask more, she abruptly ended the call. Later that night, someone left an old family photograph in my mailbox. It showed a much younger Gerald with my mother, both smiling, his hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly. On the back was written, "The only time I was ever truly happy. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to fight for this." Below his words, in different handwriting, "They'll kill for this company, just like they killed him." I sat on the stairs of my building, staring at this tangible piece of my parents' past. For the first time, I allowed myself to mourn not just for the father I never knew, but for the family we might have been. I moved into a hotel under a false name after the apartment vandalism. Cassandra had advised extreme caution, no credit cards, no telling friends where I was staying, changing locations every few days. It felt paranoid until the incident with the black SUV. I was driving to meet Thomas when I noticed the vehicle following too closely. When I changed lanes, it matched my movements. On a quiet stretch of road, it accelerated suddenly, pulling alongside me. The driver, a man in sunglasses I didn't recognize, swerved toward my car, forcing me toward the guardrail. I jerked the wheel hard, braking sharply. The SUV shot past, then slowed as if to make another attempt. Only the appearance of another car behind us caused the SUV to speed away. Shaking, I called Cassandra. "This isn't just about inheritance anymore," she said grimly. They're escalating because you're a threat to their operation. We need to move more aggressively. The next day, a whistleblower from Wilson Construction contacted me through Sarah Pete Donovan from the accounting department, had documentation of millions in suspicious wire transfers authorized by Richard and Eleanor. We arranged to meet at a public library, but Pete never showed. The next morning, Sarah called in a panic. Pete didn't come to work. His wife says he never came home last night. 2 days later, Pete was found in Wisconsin, badly beaten but alive. He claimed to have no memory of what happened or why he'd driven there. He resigned from Wilson Construction immediately. The message was clear. Anyone helping me was at risk. Even Thomas wasn't safe. When he failed to answer my calls for 24 hours, I went to his apartment and found him unconscious on the floor. The official report called it a fall, but the bruises on his wrists told a different story. In the hospital, he gripped my hand weakly. "Trust no one," he whispered, "especially not the police. Eleanor's got someone on the inside." Cassandra arranged for a private security detail for Thomas and began compiling the evidence we'd collected. At her office, she revealed something unexpected. "I've been investigating Eleanor's family for years," she admitted. "Back when I was with the DA's office, we were building a case against her brother for racketeering. The case fell apart when witnesses disappeared and evidence was compromised. I always suspected someone got to the prosecutor's office, but could never prove it. So when I walked into your office, I saw a chance to finally get justice. Eleanor's family has been operating with impunity for decades. They destroy lives, Marjorie, including yours, even before you knew they existed." The scope of what I was facing seemed overwhelming. My father's company, my inheritance, and now a decades-long criminal enterprise that had shaped my entire life from the shadows. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. An FBI agent named Daniel Cortez contacted Cassandra, requesting a meeting with me. We met in a federal building downtown, Agent Cortez bringing coffee in paper cups as we sat in a sterile conference room. "Wilson Construction has been on our radar for 3 years, he explained. "We believe it's been used to launder money for an Eastern European crime syndicate. We've had trouble getting enough evidence for warrants because someone keeps tipping them off when we get close." "You think they have someone inside the FBI?" Cassandra stated. "Or the police? Or the DA's office? We're compartmentalizing this investigation. Very few people know about it." "Why tell me?" I asked. "Because your father contacted us 6 weeks before his death," Agent Cortez said. "He was gathering evidence for us, said he'd been manipulated into illegal activities and wanted to make it right. He slid a document across the table, a cooperation agreement signed by Gerald Wilson. The heart attack was convenient timing," Agent Cortez continued. "We've been trying to determine if it was natural, but haven't found evidence suggesting otherwise." "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Continue contesting the will. Keep their attention focused on that battle while we build our case. But be careful you're dealing with dangerous people." Later that week, Ashley reached out again, asking to meet in person. Against Cassandra's advice, I agreed, choosing a crowded shopping mall for safety. Ashley looked terrible thinner than at the funeral, with dark circles under her eyes. She glanced constantly over her shoulder as we walked. "Eleanor isn't my mother," she blurted out. "Did you know that?" "She's Travis's mother, but my mom died when I was 3. Car accident, supposedly. I've always wondered." "Ashley, why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm trapped. They control everything, my trust fund, my job, my condo. When Dad changed his will, Eleanor told me I'd lose everything if I didn't help fight you. But I found something in Dad's study." She handed me a memory card. Security footage. From the day he died. Back at the hotel, I viewed the footage with Cassandra. It showed Gerald in his office, arguing violently with Richard and Eleanor. Though there was no audio, the body language was clear, threats were made, documents thrown. Then Gerald clutched his chest, collapsing to the floor. Richard and Eleanor watched for several minutes before calling for help. "They may not have caused the heart attack," Cassandra said quietly, "but they certainly didn't rush to save him." "Ashley is taking a huge risk giving us this," I said. If it's genuine, this could also be a ploy to gain your trust. I wanted to believe Ashley was genuinely reaching out, that there was a possibility of having at least one family member on my side. But Cassandra was right, I couldn't afford naivety. The company accountant Pete, now recovered enough to speak, agreed to meet secretly at Cassandra's office. His hands trembled as he detailed years of financial manipulation. Eleanor has been embezzling for years, separate from the money laundering. She has accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland. Travis helps her move the money. They've stolen at least $20 million from the company itself, on top of whatever they're doing with Richard's investors. Did my father know? I asked. He started to figure it out about 6 months ago. That's when the arguments started. Richard convinced him to keep quiet, said they'd work it out internally. Then suddenly your dad changed his will, started collecting evidence. They panicked. As I left Cassandra's office that evening, a black sedan pulled up beside me. The window lowered to reveal Travis. "Get in," he ordered. "We need to talk." "I don't think so. It's about Ashley. She's in trouble." Against my better judgment, I slid into the back seat. Instead of Travis, I found Richard Blackwell waiting, his expression grim. "Drive," he told the driver as the doors locked automatically. "What is this?" I demanded, reaching for my phone. Richard plucked it from my hand. "Just a conversation. About your future. Where's Travis? Where's Ashley?" "Travis is handling a personal matter. As for Ashley, she's fine, for now. Her loyalty has been questionable lately." The threat was implicit. I forced myself to stay calm as the car moved through evening traffic. "What do you want?" "The same thing I wanted at the funeral. Sell your shares, walk away from Wilson Construction, take the money, and disappear." "And if I don't?" Richard smiled coldly. "Then I can't guarantee your safety, or Ashley's, or Thomas Reed's. This isn't a game, Marjorie. You're interfering in business that's bigger than you understand." The car stopped in an empty parking garage. Richard handed me a document. "Sign this now, transferring your shares to Wilson Construction Holding Group. In return, you keep the monetary inheritance and the vacation property." Everyone walks away happy. Everyone except my father, who wanted me to have the company. Your father was a fool who grew a conscience too late in life. Don't make the same mistake. As I pretended to read the document, I realized we were in the parking garage beneath the Wilson Construction building, my father's building, where he had died. A plan formed in my mind, desperate, probably stupid, but the only option I could see. "I need to think about this," I said. "No time for thinking," Richard replied. "Sign now or face the consequences." Everyone except my father, who wanted me to have the company. Richard checked his watch impatiently. 5 minutes. I took my time, flipping pages slowly while mentally counting the floors between the garage and my father's office. If what Thomas had told me about the building's security system was true, there might be a way out of this. "I have a counterproposal," I said finally. "I'll sign over 49% of my shares. Maintain controlling interest, but give your investors the stability they want. We release a joint statement about moving forward as partners." Richard seemed surprised by the offer. "And why would you want to stay involved at all?" "Because it's my father's legacy. And because I'm not easily intimidated." After a moment's consideration, he nodded. "Come upstairs to the office. We'll modify the agreement and finalize it tonight." Exactly as I'd hoped. Richard led me through the empty Wilson Construction building to the executive floor. Most employees had gone home hours ago, leaving only security guards at the main desk. Richard nodded to them as we passed, his hand firmly on my elbow in what would appear to casual observers as a gentlemanly gesture rather than coercion. My father's office, now Richard's, was exactly as I remembered it, except for one addition. Eleanor sat behind the desk, Travis standing behind her. There was no sign of Ashley. "Look what I found wandering around Chicago," Richard announced. "Our majority shareholder has agreed to be reasonable." Eleanor's smile was triumphant. I knew she'd come around once she understood her position. "Did you explain the alternatives?" "Graphically," Richard replied. I scanned the room, noting the location of cameras Thomas had mentioned. one in the corner above the bookshelf, another disguised in the smoke detector. My father had installed them secretly, after beginning to suspect his partners. I have conditions, I said, playing for time. First, Ashley's trust fund remains untouched. Second, I want written verification that all legal challenges to my inheritance will be dropped. You're hardly in a position to make demands, Travis said. I'm the one with the shares you need, I countered. And I'm the one who can either sign them over quietly or create a very public scandal. Eleanor leaned forward. What kind of scandal do you think you could create? Who would believe you over us? The FBI might, I replied casually. Especially with the evidence my father collected before his death. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Richard's confidence faltered. What evidence? Travis demanded. Gerald was gathering proof of your money laundering operation for months. Bank records, client lists, shell companies. He copied everything, including emails between the three of you discussing how to hide transactions from regulators. She's bluffing, Eleanor said, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. Am I? Why do you think he changed his will? He knew what you'd do once he went to the authorities. He wanted to protect his legacy and me. Richard moved closer, his manner threatening. If such evidence existed, we would have found it. Really? Did you check his personal items? The ones the lawyer gave me? Or his secure email accounts? Or the safety deposit box at First National under his mother's maiden name? I was making most of it up, but the panic on their faces told me my shots in the dark were hitting targets. Where is this alleged evidence now? Eleanor asked. Safe. With instructions to release it to the FBI if anything happens to me, Thomas Reed or Ashley. Travis slammed his fist on the desk. I told you we should have dealt with her immediately, just like we did with Gerald. Eleanor shot him a warning look, but it was too late. The admission hung in the air between us. So my father's heart attack wasn't natural, I said quietly. Your father was going to destroy everything we built, Eleanor hissed. 20 years of work, relationships with investors who don't take disappointment well. He was willing to risk all our lives because he suddenly developed a conscience about his precious first daughter. You killed him, I said, the reality sinking in. We encouraged his heart condition, Richard corrected smoothly. Medication substitution. Nothing traceable. The same could easily happen to you, Marjorie. I needed to keep them talking. The security system Thomas described would be recording everything, but only if I could activate it using the blue key I'd found among my father's possessions. Where's Ashley? I asked. Somewhere safe, Eleanor replied. She became a liability when she started snooping through Gerald's things. So emotional about her dear daddy. Never understood the realities of business. The reality that you're criminals? Richard laughed. The reality that everything comes with a price. Your father knew that when he walked away from you and your mother. He chose wealth and power over family once. His mistake was thinking he could reverse that choice without consequences. Somewhere safe, Eleanor replied. She became a liability when she started snooping through Gerald's things. So emotional about her dear daddy. Never understood the realities of business. So what happens now? I asked. You force me to sign over my shares, then have another convenient accident? Richard laughed. The reality that everything comes with a price. Your father knew that when he walked away from you and your mother. He chose wealth and power over family once. His mistake was thinking he could reverse that choice without consequences. I leaned against the desk, my hand searching for the port underneath the smooth wood surface. And if I refuse? As they talked, I moved casually toward the desk, sliding my hand into my pocket where the blue key waited. According to Thomas, inserting it into a hidden port behind the desk would activate the system's silent alarm and recording backup. Richard stepped closer. Then things get unpleasant. For you, for your Uncle Thomas, for Ashley, we've dealt with obstacles before. You're forgetting something, I said, stalling. The evidence. My fingers found a small recessed area. I slipped the blue key in, feeling it click into place. A small red light blinked on the smoke detector the system was active. I needed to get them to admit everything clearly, for the record. So let me understand, I said. You three have been using Wilson Construction to launder money for Eastern European investors. You embezzled millions from the company. When my father discovered this and planned to go to authorities, you tampered with his medication, causing his heart attack. Now you're threatening to do the same to me unless I sign over my inheritance. Did I miss anything? She's recording this, Travis suddenly realized, looking around frantically. Richard lunged across the desk, grabbing me by the throat. Where's the device? Where? The office door burst open. Ashley stood there, flanked by FBI agents with weapons drawn, Agent Cortez at the lead. Federal agents! Hands where we can see them. The next moments were chaos. Richard released me, reaching for what turned out to be a concealed weapon. A shot rang out, one of the agents fired, hitting Richard in the shoulder. Eleanor attempted to delete files on the computer while Travis made a break for the private elevator. They were all subdued within minutes. As agents secured the office, I slumped into a chair, adrenaline draining away. Ashley rushed to my side. Are you okay? I was so worried they'd hurt you. How did you? I've been working with the FBI for weeks, she explained. Ever since I found Dad's journals, I couldn't stand by anymore, not after what they did to him. Agent Cortez approached as Richard, Eleanor, and Travis were led away in handcuffs. Perfect timing with that recording system, he said. We've been monitoring since you activated it. Between their confessions and the evidence we've already gathered, they won't see daylight for decades. What about the police officer who was helping them? I asked. Lieutenant Wallace is being arrested as we speak, along with 2 judges and an assistant DA. This goes deeper than just Wilson Construction. Later, at FBI headquarters, Ashley and I sat together as agents processed the 3 main conspirators. She looked exhausted but somehow lighter. I always knew something was wrong, she said. The way Eleanor controlled everything, the strange men who would visit with Richard. Dad changed in the last few months of his life. Started looking at old photos, talking about regrets. I wish I'd known him, I said truthfully. Ashley took my hand. He wished that too. He told me once that walking away from you and your mother was the worst mistake of his life. He was trying to fix it, in his way. Thomas arrived, his arm still in a sling from his accident. When he saw us, tears filled his eyes. You 2 together, he said. Gerald would have been so happy to see this. As dawn broke over Chicago, I stood at the window of the FBI office, watching the city come to life. My father's company was now mine. His killers were in custody. And somehow, against all odds, I'd found family I never knew I had. 6 months after the arrests, I stood in the courthouse as the judge delivered the final verdict in the case against Eleanor, Richard, and Travis. The charges were extensive: money laundering, racketeering, fraud, embezzlement, and second-degree murder for my father's death. The evidence was overwhelming once the FBI gained access to all of Wilson Construction's records and the offshore accounts. The defendants are hereby sentenced to serve no less than 25 years in federal prison, the judge announced, her voice firm. Eleanor showed no emotion as the sentence was read, her face a mask of cold dignity. Richard stared at the floor, his former confidence shattered. Only Travis looked at me directly, a mixture of hatred and something that might have been regret in his eyes. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for a statement. With Ashley and Thomas flanking me, I stepped up to the microphones. Today, justice has been served. Not just for my father, but for all the people harmed by the criminal activities hidden within Wilson Construction. While nothing can bring my father back or restore the years we lost, I hope this outcome provides some measure of closure. The legal battle over my father's will had been resolved months earlier, once evidence of Eleanor's manipulation and criminal activities came to light. I was officially recognized as Gerald Wilson's primary heir and rightful owner of his estate. The first thing I did with my inheritance was establish a scholarship foundation in my mother's name, dedicated to supporting children who had lost parents or been separated from them due to circumstances beyond their control. The Diana Wilson Memorial Foundation would ensure that her kindness and strength lived on, helping others who faced the challenges I had known growing up. Ashley and I spent hours sorting through our father's personal possessions, discovering more about the man neither of us had truly known. Among his papers, we found journals dating back 20 years, detailing his struggles with guilt and his efforts to keep track of my life from afar. "He watched your high school graduation from his car in the parking lot," Ashley told me, reading from one entry. "He writes that you looked so much like Mom that it broke his heart all over again." "I wish he'd had the courage to approach me," I said. "Eleanor threatened to harm you if he tried to reconnect," Ashley explained. "He believed her. After seeing what they were capable of, I understand why." Our relationship grew slowly but steadily. Ashley had been as much a victim of Eleanor's manipulation as anyone, raised in a household where appearances mattered more than truth and money more than love. She had her own healing to do, her own path to find now that she was free of Eleanor's control. Wilson Construction required extensive restructuring. Many of the company's projects had been tainted by fraudulent practices, and its reputation in the industry was in tatters. After careful consideration, I appointed Sarah Jenkins as CEO, trusting her integrity and experience to guide the company through its transformation. "We'll need to be completely transparent," Sarah said during our first official meeting. "Every contract reviewed, every financial record audited. It's the only way to regain trust." "Whatever it takes," I agreed. "My father built this company before it was corrupted. I want to restore it to what it should have been." Under Sarah's leadership, Wilson Construction adopted strict ethical guidelines and compliance measures. We lost some clients unwilling to operate under such scrutiny, but gained others who valued integrity in their business partners. The main vacation home presented another opportunity for healing. Rather than selling it or keeping it for personal use, I decided to convert it into a retreat center for children from broken homes. The seaside property that had stood empty for years became a place of laughter and recovery, where kids could learn they weren't defined by their family circumstances. Thomas became a constant presence in my life, filling in the gaps of my family history. He told me stories about my mother as a young woman, her dreams, her spirit, her unwavering love for me. "Diana was the strongest person I ever knew," he said as we walked along the Chicago lakefront one autumn afternoon. "When she found out she was pregnant with you, she was terrified, but determined to give you the best life possible. Even after everything that happened, she never spoke ill of Gerald to you. She wanted you to form your own opinions. She protected me from so much," I realized. "I never knew how much until now." Thomas nodded. "That's what parents are supposed to do." Gerald tried, in his way, once he understood the danger. He just waited too long. Cassandra Reynolds, the attorney who had helped navigate the criminal case, became both a mentor and friend. Her experience with complex legal battles and her unwavering ethical stance provided guidance as I learned to manage my new responsibilities. "What will you do now?" she asked one day over coffee. "You've got the company on solid footing. The foundation is thriving. Ashley is doing well. What's next for Marjorie Wilson?" It was a question I'd been asking myself. I had taken a leave of absence from my social work position to handle the legal battles and company restructuring. While I missed the direct impact of working with foster children, I recognized that my inheritance gave me different tools to effect change. "I think I'll split my time," I answered. "Between overseeing the foundation, consulting with the company, and returning to social work part-time. I don't want to lose touch with the individual stories that got me into this field in the first place." During a visit to my parents' graves, my mother's modest marker, now accompanied by my father's simpler one, moved from the elaborate family plot Eleanor had chosen, I made a discovery that brought everything full circle. Among my mother's papers, preserved by a family friend, I found a pregnancy journal she had kept while expecting me. The final entry, dated just before my birth, contained a revelation. Gerald still doesn't know about the baby. He left before I could tell him, convinced by Eleanor's threats that I was unfaithful. "Someday, when it's safe, I'll tell our daughter the truth that her father didn't abandon her before birth. He simply never knew she existed until it was too late." I sat beside the graves, tears streaming down my face as I processed this final piece of the puzzle. My father hadn't initially abandoned me. He hadn't known about me. Eleanor's manipulation had begun even earlier than I'd realized, poisoning my parents' relationship before I was born. When he did learn of my existence, fear for my safety kept him at a distance, It wasn't the story I'd carried all my life, of a father who simply didn't want his daughter. It was a story of manipulation, fear, and regret, tragic, but somehow easier to forgive. On a crisp spring morning, exactly 1 year after receiving that life-changing letter from Mr. Harrington, I stood on the balcony of my new home, overlooking Lake Michigan. Ashley was coming for dinner, bringing her new boyfriend, a kind-hearted architect she'd met through legitimate company business. Thomas would be there too, along with Sarah and several friends who had stood by me through the ordeal. I thought about the journey of the past year, from social worker struggling to make rent to millionaire business owner, from abandoned daughter to someone with a complex but healing family. The inheritance had brought danger and pain, but also truth and connection I might never have found otherwise. My phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. "Found more old photos in Dad's storage unit. Can't wait to show you tonight." I smiled, anticipating another piece of my history recovered, another gap filled in the family narrative we were piecing together. The lawyer's letter about my estranged father's will had indeed revealed my family's true colors, both the darkness I had to overcome and the unexpected light I discovered along the way. Gerald Wilson's final act had been to entrust me with his legacy, not just of wealth, but of truth and the chance for redemption. In choosing to face that truth rather than run from it, I had broken the cycle of secrets and fear that had controlled my family for decades. That, more than any inheritance, was the true gift my father had left me. Have you ever discovered that a family story you'd believed your whole life wasn't actually true? How did it change your perspective on your past and the people involved? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might find meaning in Marjorie's journey from abandonment to understanding. Thank you for joining me on this emotional exploration of family secrets, betrayal, and ultimately, healing. Until next time, remember that sometimes our greatest strength comes from facing difficult truths,